In the 1990s, SUVs weren't built to fit into cities. Cities were forced to adapt to them. These vehicles were taller than sedans, heavier than pickup trucks, and powerful enough to tow boats, campers, and sometimes common sense. This was the decade when size became status, power replaced practicality, and the modern SUV obsession was born. These are the 10 biggest SUVs of the 1990s, and what owning that much mass and muscle really meant. Why the 1990s went big. Gas was relatively cheap. SUV safety regulations were different from passenger cars, and buyers wanted vehicles that felt unstoppable. Most of these SUVs used body-on-frame truck platforms, came with V8 engines, were engineered before modern efficiency or emissions priorities. They weren't crossovers. They were trucks with seats, and they reshaped the industry. Number 10. Ford Explorer, 1991 to 1999, the SUV that changed everything. The Ford Explorer didn't need to be the biggest SUV of the 1990s. It just needed to be big enough to change how Americans bought cars. Introduced in the early 1990s, the Explorer was built on a pickup-based platform, giving buyers something most family vehicles didn't offer at the time: a tall driving position, real towing capability, and the psychological comfort of sitting above traffic. Compared to sedans and wagons, it felt powerful, even when it wasn't fast. Compared to minivans, it felt tough. And compared to full-size trucks, it felt approachable. That balance is what made it explode in popularity. Owners liked the sense of control, the visibility, and the idea that this was a vehicle that could handle weather, rough roads, and weekend projects without hesitation. For many buyers, this was their first experience with a truck-based vehicle used as a daily driver. But that transition came with trade-offs. The Explorer's body-on-frame construction meant it drove very differently from passenger cars. Ride comfort, braking distances, and handling behavior reflected its truck origins, something many early buyers didn't fully expect. Fuel consumption was also a reality check. While reasonable by 1990s SUV standards, it was noticeably higher than the cars it replaced, especially in stop-and-go driving. Over time, ownership costs could increase as suspension, steering, and drivetrain components wore under the demands of daily use, a common characteristic of vehicles designed to handle both utility and commuting. The real impact of the Explorer wasn't mechanical, it was cultural. It proved that Americans were willing to trade efficiency and car-like dynamics for height, size, and perceived safety. Once that lesson was learned, the industry shifted almost overnight. Competitors rushed to build similar SUVs, sedans began losing ground, and the SUV became the default family vehicle, a position it still holds today. The Ford Explorer didn't just start a trend, it redefined what the average buyer thought they needed. Number 9. Jeep Grand Cherokee ZJ, when size learned how to wear a suit. The Jeep Grand Cherokee didn't try to be the biggest SUV of the 1990s. It tried to be the most convincing. Launched in the early 90s, the ZJ generation Grand Cherokee took real off-road hardware and wrapped it in something new for the time: a refined interior, smooth on-road manners by SUV standards, and an image that worked just as well in a corporate parking lot as it did on a dirt trail. Underneath the styling, this was still a serious utility vehicle. Body-on-frame construction, solid axles, and available V8 power meant the Grand Cherokee carried real mass and real capability, not just the appearance of it. For many owners, this was the first SUV that felt like a legitimate alternative to a luxury sedan. The high seating position gave confidence. The V8 option delivered strong low-end torque, and the Jeep badge carried decades of off-road credibility. But blending luxury and truck DNA came with compromises. Fuel consumption was noticeably higher than many buyers expected, especially for those moving up from cars. Ride quality, while improved compared to earlier SUVs, still reflected the vehicle's weight and suspension design. And as these vehicles aged, electrical systems and interior components could require increasing attention, a common challenge for early luxury-oriented SUVs. What the Grand Cherokee did exceptionally well was change expectations. It proved that SUVs didn't have to feel Spartan or agricultural to be taken seriously. They could be comfortable, stylish, and still intimidating in size and stance. That single idea reshaped the market. After the ZJ, nearly every manufacturer began chasing the same formula: big body, strong engine, upscale interior. The Grand Cherokee didn't just make SUVs more popular. Number 8. Nissan Pathfinder, WD-21 R50, when rugged meant heavy. The Nissan Pathfinder arrived in the 1990s with a different mission. It wasn't designed to impress suburban driveways. It was built to survive rough roads, bad weather, and long ownership. Based on a truck-derived platform, the Pathfinder carried real mass for its class. High ground clearance, a tall roofline, and genuine four-wheel drive systems made it feel substantial, especially compared to the cars many buyers were upgrading from. Power came from V6 engines tuned more for durability than speed. Acceleration was not the headline. Torque and reliability were. For owners, the Pathfinder delivered confidence. It felt planted on uneven terrain and solid on the highway, with a structure that communicated toughness rather than refinement. But that toughness came with trade-offs. Interior space, while practical, was tighter than many American SUVs of the era. Ride comfort and noise levels reflected its truck roots. And fuel consumption, though acceptable by 1990 standards, was still a noticeable step up from passenger cars. As the decade progressed, the Pathfinder evolved. The later R50 generation moved toward a more refined feel, signaling Nissan's recognition that SUV buyers wanted size and strength, but not at the expense of daily comfort. The Pathfinder's real significance lies in what it taught the industry. Durability alone wasn't enough. To compete in the growing SUV market, vehicles had to be big, capable, and increasingly comfortable. The Pathfinder helped bridge that gap, and in doing so, showed Japanese automakers how the SUV segment would need to change to survive in the US. Number 7. Chevrolet Blazer, full-size K5, a truck that accidentally became a family vehicle. The full-size Chevrolet Blazer wasn't designed to be refined. It was designed to be capable. Built on GM's full-size truck platform, the K5 Blazer carried the same bones as a pickup: heavy frame, solid axles, and available V8 engines tuned for torque, not finesse. By modern standards, it was enormous. Wide body, tall ride height, and a driving position that made traffic feel smaller. This was an SUV that felt more like equipment than transportation. Owners appreciated the strength. The Blazer could tow, climb, and absorb abuse that would overwhelm most passenger vehicles. In bad weather or rough terrain, it delivered a sense of control that was rare at the time. But daily ownership came with compromises. Steering required effort. Braking distances reflected the vehicle's weight, and fuel consumption matched its size, especially in city driving. Comfort was secondary to durability. Ride quality reminded drivers that this was a utility vehicle first, and a commuter only by adaptation. What made the K5 Blazer important wasn't polish. It was proof that buyers were willing to live with truck-level trade-offs in exchange for size, power, and presence. That lesson echoed across the industry. Vehicles like the K5 blurred the line between work trucks and personal transportation, helping push SUVs toward the full-size, V8-powered machines that dominated the late 1990s. The Blazer didn't try to soften its edges. It dared buyers to accept them. Number 6. Toyota Land Cruiser 80 Series, built heavy, built to last. The Toyota Land Cruiser 80 Series wasn't just big, it was intentionally massive. Introduced in the 1990s, this SUV was engineered to operate in parts of the world where roads were optional and failure wasn't acceptable. As a result, it carried more steel, more reinforcement, and more mechanical redundancy than most SUVs of its era. Solid axles front and rear, a tall stance, and a wide body gave it a commanding presence on and off the road. Power came from a naturally aspirated inline-six designed for durability rather than outright performance, delivering steady torque instead of speed. Behind the wheel, the Land Cruiser felt substantial. Not quick, not light, but unshakable. Owners valued its reputation for longevity. When properly maintained, these vehicles often remained in service far longer than many of their competitors, a characteristic that became central to the Land Cruiser's identity. That durability, however, came at a cost. The Land Cruiser's weight affected fuel consumption, braking, and handling. Maintenance, while infrequent when done correctly, could be expensive due to the vehicle's heavy-duty components and complex systems. Neglect often led to high repair bills, not because of poor design, but because of the standards it was built to. The real impact of the 80 Series was philosophical. It showed that buyers were willing to accept size, weight, and operating costs in exchange for trust. Not features, not styling, but confidence that the vehicle would endure. That mindset influenced how SUVs were engineered going forward, especially at the higher end of the market. The Land Cruiser didn't chase trends. It outlasted them. Number 5. GMC Yukon, 1992 to 1999. When suburbs met truck power. The GMC Yukon wasn't trying to reinvent the SUV. It was trying to scale up what already worked. Introduced in the early 1990s, the Yukon was built directly on GM's full-size truck architecture. That meant a heavy frame, solid components, and V8 engines designed to produce low-end torque rather than speed. In terms of presence, the Yukon felt enormous for its time. Tall ride height, wide body, and a seating position that put drivers above traffic made it clear this wasn't a car pretending to be an SUV. For owners, the appeal was simple: capability. The Yukon could haul families, tow trailers, and handle long highway miles without feeling strained. It delivered the sense that nothing about daily life was asking too much from the vehicle. But that confidence came with trade-offs. Fuel consumption was significant, especially in urban driving. Brakes, tires, and suspension components worked hard under the vehicle's weight and often required attention sooner than lighter vehicles. Maneuvering in tight spaces demanded awareness of just how much mass you were controlling. Comfort improved throughout the decade, but the Yukon never pretended to be delicate. It was a truck at heart, adapted for people rather than cargo. The Yukon's importance lies in normalization. It helped make full-size V8-powered SUVs an acceptable, even desirable choice for suburban families. Once that door was opened, there was no going back. The modern American full-size SUV traces a direct line to vehicles like this. The Yukon didn't push boundaries, it made them permanent. Number 4. Chevrolet Suburban, the vehicle that redefined too big. The Chevrolet Suburban didn't become legendary by accident. It became legendary by refusing to compromise on size. By the 1990s, the Suburban was longer than most sedans, wider than many parking spaces, and heavier than some light-duty trucks. It wasn't designed to fit into everyday life. Everyday life had to adjust to it. Built on a full-size truck platform, the Suburban offered V8 engines tuned for torque and endurance. This was a vehicle engineered to move people, cargo, and trailers at the same time, without apology. Behind the wheel, the Suburban felt unstoppable. High seating position, long wheelbase, and sheer mass created a sense of authority that few vehicles could match. Owners valued its versatility. Large families, businesses, and long-distance travelers appreciated the ability to carry passengers and equipment without choosing one over the other. But that capability came with consequences. Fuel consumption was substantial, even by 1990 standards. Braking distances reflected the vehicle's weight. Routine maintenance, tires, brakes, suspension, cost more simply because everything was larger and worked harder. Maneuverability was a learned skill. Tight parking lots, narrow streets, and urban environments demanded patience and awareness. The Suburban's true impact was cultural. It normalized extreme size as practical. It taught buyers that bigger wasn't excess. It was preparation. That idea reshaped family vehicles, city planning, and the SUV market itself. Modern full-size SUVs exist because the Suburban proved there was no upper limit, only acceptance. The Suburban didn't ask if it was too big. It answered the question by surviving for generations. Number 3. Ford Expedition, late 1990s. Ford goes all in on size. When Ford introduced the Expedition in the late 1990s, it wasn't testing the waters. It was making a statement. This was Ford's full-size response to GM's dominance, built on a truck-based platform and engineered to deliver maximum space, power, and road presence. From the outside, the Expedition felt enormous for its time. Wide body, tall roofline, and a high seating position made it clear this was not an SUV designed to blend in. Under the hood, V8 engines delivered strong low-end torque, tuned for towing, highway cruising, and sustained load rather than quick acceleration. The Expedition wasn't about speed. It was about authority. For owners, the appeal was immediate. 3 rows of seating, large cargo capacity, and the ability to tow boats, campers, or trailers without hesitation made it a true multi-purpose vehicle. But controlling that much mass came with responsibility. Fuel consumption was significant, particularly in city driving. Braking distances and handling reflected the vehicle's size and weight, and ownership required consistent maintenance, as components like transmissions, suspension, and brakes worked under constant load, a reality for full-size SUVs of the era. The Expedition's importance goes beyond the vehicle itself. It confirmed that full-size SUVs were no longer niche products. They were mainstream family transportation. After the Expedition, size was no longer an exception. It was an expectation. Ford didn't just join the full-size SUV market. It helped lock it in. Number 2. Lexus LX450. Luxury meets mass. The Lexus LX450 wasn't just a big SUV. It was a statement of power wrapped in refinement. Based on Toyota's legendary Land Cruiser platform, the LX450 inherited the same heavy-duty architecture: solid axles, a tall stance, and a body built to last decades. But Lexus added a twist: interior luxury, smoother ride quality, and upscale finishes that made it feel at home in the city, while still capable of dominating off-road terrain. From the outside, the LX450 projected authority. Its wide stance and towering profile made other vehicles look small. Inside, it promised comfort, refinement, and a quiet cabin, a rare combination for SUVs of its size at the time. Under the hood, the inline-six engine offered steady torque and reliability, tuned for consistent performance rather than outright speed. It wasn't about racing, it was about commanding presence. Owners enjoyed an SUV that could carry people, cargo, and confidence in equal measure. But the experience came with trade-offs. Fuel consumption reflected the LX's mass, and maintenance costs could be higher than lighter SUVs due to its heavy-duty components and luxury systems. The LX450 demonstrated an important industry lesson. Buyers would pay premium prices for size, capability, and comfort, not just one or the other. It redefined what a luxury SUV could be, and it helped cement the idea that size wasn't just acceptable in the luxury market, it was desirable. The Lexus LX450 didn't compromise. It simply proved that luxury and mass could coexist, setting a precedent still visible in today's high-end SUVs. And now, number 1. Hummer H1, the SUV that defined excess. The Hummer H1 wasn't just an SUV. It was a machine built for extremes, and it showed the world exactly how far size and power could go. Derived from military Humvees, the H1 was nearly 7 feet wide, with portal axles, massive ground clearance, and a chassis designed to conquer terrain most vehicles would avoid. This was a vehicle that didn't compromise for comfort, convenience, or fuel economy. It was built to dominate. Inside, the H1 felt industrial yet purposeful. Every control reminded you that this was a vehicle with serious capabilities. It wasn't daily commuting made easy. It was extreme engineering brought to the street. Owners quickly discovered that driving the H1 required respect. Its width made city streets a challenge. Fuel consumption was enormous, even by 1990s SUV standards. Routine maintenance could be complex, due to the vehicle's unique components and military-grade construction. Yet that didn't stop it from becoming iconic. The H1 represented a peak in SUV ambition, a symbol of size, presence, and power. It also marked a turning point. The public began to notice the trade-offs of excessive mass, high fuel consumption, and urban impracticality. In many ways, the Hummer H1 foreshadowed the SUV debates of the 2000s, the balance between capability, efficiency, and everyday usability. The H1 didn't just push boundaries, it exceeded them, showing the world what happens when size becomes an obsession. Owning one wasn't just about transportation, it was a commitment to living with the extremes, for better or worse. The biggest SUVs of the 1990s weren't accidents. They were responses to cheap fuel, consumer demand, and a desire for power and presence. But they also changed cities, regulations, and expectations forever. Modern SUVs exist because these giants showed the limits of unchecked size. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe and comment below. Which 1990s SUV would you still drive today? And which one pushed things too far?